Hi, welcome to day 15 of our confinement or shut-in series. I want to start today with a trip. I want you to come back with me. So I'm at Utah State University in Logan, Utah, and I'm in my senior year of studying psychology. I'm downstairs working in the kitchen on my work, and I'm living at home with my mom and dad as I'm finishing up my schooling here. I hear this loud noise upstairs, and it sounds like someone's falling, and then I hear screaming, and I'm obviously concerned. I go running upstairs and and it's coming from the master bedroom, from my mom and dad's bedroom. And in the bedroom, as I walk in the bathroom, my father is laying on the floor, crying, screaming in a disassociative state. Now, to understand this story, you need to know my dad is a Vietnam veteran, and he served 3 tours of duty in Vietnam. He was captured on several different occasions, tortured, and had some really bad experiences there, many of which he never shared with us. This night, I came to understand one of them that he had never shared with us. He was in a fully dissociative state, suffering from extreme PTSD. And he saw me as one of his Vietnamese captors and thought I was coming to beat him again. It took quite a bit of time to get him up, get him dressed, get him in bed, get a cup of tea, get him to breathe, and to come back from that dissociative state. I saw a window into both his experience in Vietnam and into PTSD that I had never seen before. Up to that point, post-traumatic stress disorder was something I studied in school. It was a theory, it was a model, it was a diagnosis. That night, it became very, very personal, and I began to understand a lot of things that my father did to me, to our family, and to himself through that lens that night. From there, I went to graduate school in social work, and I was working as a counselor, a certified addictions counselor with adolescent drug addicts. Again, I came face to face with not the theory or the concept or even the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress, but the reality of it. In many of my patients had been physically, sexually, emotionally abused, sometimes to an incredible level. And as they poured out their hearts and souls over the course of these therapeutic interventions while they were in our program, I came to see something that changed my life. I saw resilience. I would marvel. They would speak through their experiences and what went on. And during the course of group therapy and family therapy and recreational therapy and our one-on-one therapy, all of which I participated in various ways, I saw they overcame. They did stuff I couldn't believe possible. And they came out and they were in recovery. And to this day, thanks to Facebook, I have many of them, of my patients from back in 1988, 89, and 90 that are now grown and married and have children and thriving, wonderful lives because of the experience of what they did there, their recovery, their growth, what they did. Well, as I began to look for more and more reasons why and how I can help people to overcome, get past, and do the things they want, I stumbled upon the work of Martin Seligman. And yesterday I talked about his groundbreaking work in learned helplessness. Well, after that, he made a pivot in his research to looking at how do we look at growth? And he began to develop a theory, a model of what he calls post-traumatic growth. That as often as you see PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, there is post-traumatic growth. And he was summoned, if you will, to the Pentagon by General Casey, who was the Army Chief of Staff, and said, we are having an unbelievable amount of people coming back from Iran and Iraq, broken, incredible post-traumatic stress, and it manifests itself in substance abuse, in divorce, in depression, and in unprecedented rates of suicide. And he said, General Casey asked Martin Seligman, can positive psychology help us? What can we do? And he spent years working with the Army to develop programs. And he said, instead of trying to fix people when they get back, because the Army's not a hospital, what if we take care of them up front instead of training weakness out of them? What if we build strength in them so that going into combat, when all hell breaks loose, it will be a post-traumatic growth experience for them. They will be able to grow coming out of this. And he wrote a brilliant article on this in the Harvard Business Review if you want to see it. Or he goes into depth into this in his book Flourishing, which I strongly recommend. If you want to do something while you're off and when you have your downtime here, read the book Flourishing by Martin Seligman. So in this book, he talks about a few key things. And he said, as you begin to study post-traumatic growth, the Nietzsche quote that's so famous, what doesn't kill me will help me, takes on a deeper meaning. and it did for me, as they began to look at what is it that really creates just trauma in people's life. And they picked the 15 most traumatic things that can happen to people, things like being tortured and grave illness and rape and imprisonment, things that are just brutal. And they began to notice this pattern, that people who have had one of those events have more intense strengths than people who have none of those events. But where the research really took a turn was people that have two of those events have significantly more intense strengths than people that only had one of those events. People that had three of those events had significantly more strength, intensity of strength, than people who only had two. In other words, there was a pattern to post-traumatic growth. In his book, Flourishing, he shares the unbelievable example of Brigadier General Rhonda Cronum. And she is, by every definition, an American hero. She's a flight surgeon. She is a jet pilot. She's an MD. She is a microbiologist. And she's a recreational helicopter pilot. She was in the Gulf War. She was deployed on a rescue mission in Iraq. Her helicopter was shot down. They had an 8-person crew. Only 3 people survived the crash. She was one of them. But she survived with 2 broken arms and 1 broken leg. She was captured by Saddam's army, taken in and brutally tortured, raped, beaten, every bad thing you can. I don't know if you can imagine having 2 broken arms and 1 broken leg and going through what she went through. 8 days later, as we won that war, she was released. When she came home, she was celebrated as a hero. Today, she's a brigadier general. At that time, she was a major. When she talks about that experience and what happened to her, she went in detail to how that changed her life. And here's what she had to say. As it relates to her patients, she said, I'm a much better flight surgeon and a much better doctor because the concerns of my patients, they're real to me. They're no longer just academic. As it relates to personal strength, she says, as a commander and as a leader, I am able to make decisions quickly and effectively with almost no fear, with almost no anxiety, because the comparison, what's hard, what's difficult, what's challenging has changed so much for me. It's almost eliminated fear and anxiety from my day-to-day life as I have to make tough decisions as a commander and a leader. When it comes to appreciation of family, she said, when you come that close to losing everything, all of your relationships and family for forever, they become dear to you in a way that they never were. She said, I have a patience and a love for my family that I simply didn't have. And she said, as it relates to spiritual change, she said, I had an out-of-body experience while I was being tortured that opened my mind up to the fact that there really is a possibility of a spiritual life that transcends and is beyond just the physical life. And she says, as it relates to my priorities, I always used to sort my tasks into A, B, and C priorities. She says, I disregard and dismiss the C priorities immediately. I do not miss games with my children. I do not waste time, energy, and effort on things of little or no value. There is a transformation that happens to people. Tragedy, trauma, oftentimes builds and brings transformation. And if you look, when we talk to the Vietnam veterans who were captured and tortured, sometimes for years over in Vietnam, 61% of those veterans that came out of there said that they came out of that experience psychologically stronger, psychologically more powerful, more capable, and tremendously served them for the rest of their lives. Now, I am not an advocate of war. I am not an advocate of trauma in or out of war, and I'm not an advocate of deliberately seeking out these kinds of experiences. What I do know is they come. They come to everybody, and they come when you least expect them. When they come, that's where life is formed. Those are the meanings where you look about what you're going to have. For me, it came right after I finished graduate school. And I lost 2 jobs at 2 different places in 6 months. And we lost everything we owned. I don't know if you've ever been through deep financial trouble, but I mean everything. They repossessed our house. Well, we had to walk away from our house and it was taken from us. Our car was repossessed. Our savings gone. Our money gone. Everything. And I was so devastated that I remember begging my wife to go down and apply for food stamps because I was too embarrassed to do it. And I went from loving to go grocery shopping to never wanting to go grocery shopping because it ripped my heart out to pay for it. Now, looking back, I feel even worse that the brave man that I am, I send my wife out to go do that because I was too beaten down to be able to do that. So here I am with a master's degree, years of experience working as an addictions therapist, and my wife and our 5 children move into 2 bedrooms of a 3-bedroom house with my mother-in-law. No money, living on food stamps. And my job? I am the night clerk at the rental car place at the Salt Lake City airport, the graveyard shift. And it was in that moment, at that time, that I began to build the structure of the character of the person that I am today. And out of that is where I learned how to work for myself and not for other people. It's where I learned how to become an executive coach and not just a therapist. It's where I became fascinated, obsessed with trying to figure out the mental models and tools and skills that would allow people to take whatever comes at them and be able to rise above it and respond to it. I didn't have a word for it at the time, but now I know it's called post-traumatic growth. If you look at everything from the wisdom literature from thousands of years ago, East and West, all the way up to the latest research coming out of our universities right now, all around the globe, that when you go through personal transformation, there's 4 elements that seem to manifest almost every time. First, there's a deeper appreciation it's a renewed appreciation for the world around you. You all of a sudden see things that were there all along that you've never seen. Colors, tastes, sounds, everything. And it's not just this narrow definition of happiness, these things that just this happens, then I'll be happy, then I'll have pleasure. But this sense of the entire experience, the totality of life and what goes on, the good and the bad, the yin and the yang, the black and the white, all of it. There's this renewed sense of appreciation for just how wonderful life is. Second, there is this elevation, enhancing, enlarging of your personal strength, the ability to have self-efficacy, to take hard things and do them, to know that you can go through. You can take everything away from me that I have, and I will get it back. And I have zero fear of losing everything I own. I've already done it. I've already lost. I know exactly what that feels like, and I know that I survived it. And I know exactly how to get it back. I have zero fear of that because I have this enhanced sense of personal strength. Third, that you begin to be open to new possibilities that you never saw before. Not because they weren't there, but because you didn't even see them. You know the saying that when one door closes, another opens. That's irrelevant because most of us are too afraid to walk through the door. When you become open to these new possibilities, when that door opens, you walk through it. You embrace and take new possibilities. You have an expanded sense of identity, so you have an expanded sense of possibility. Your possibilities will never exceed your identity. And your identity, as it expands, will always expand possibilities. The fourth, there is a spiritual deepening. There is a sense that you get coming out of these personal transformations of connection to things that are greater and bigger than yourselves. Of something, you move to a more purpose-driven life that is intentional in its desire to do good and not just acquisitional in your desire to accumulate and succeed. Here's what I'm going to ask you to look at. Every one of you have places where you had post-traumatic growth. You had experiences that people looking at it from the outside, how did you make it through? How did you do that? How did you get that done? How did you get through that? And I'm not asking you to compare pain and see who's worse and whose trauma was bigger, because we all have different levels of trauma. We're all at different places, but you have yours. And I want you to grab a notepad, a journal, a piece of paper, and I want you to just write down 5, 10 of these places where you experienced hardship, difficulty, challenge that outsiders look at and marvel. How did you make it through that? But you know that is where your personal transformation happened. That was a turning point for you, a fork in the road where you went a different direction, where your possibilities expanded, your strength enlarged, your appreciation for life grew, and your spirituality deepened. Write them down. And now what I want you to do is look for a pattern. What I promise you is this, that if you write down 5 or 10 of those and you start breaking down, what did you become out of it? How did you transform? Where did these 4 areas come up for you? What you're going to see is a very distinct pattern of how you grow. Better than a book, better than a theory, better than someone else's story is your story. What is your pattern? And when you figure out that pattern, you can literally reach into the past and grab that wisdom and pull it forward to today, to apply in today's environment, in today's situation, so that you are not surviving the COVID-19, you're thriving in it. And you're not just going to get through it, you are going to become someone significantly more capable of acting on the best instincts, desires, goals, and dreams of your heart. Please do this. Once you have this, you write them down, you find the pattern, get together with whoever you're confined with. If it's your family, your friends, your children, your spouse, whoever, Skype in people that you love and care about and share with them what is your post-traumatic growth strategy? What are your principles? How did you get through? What is your recipe? Get theirs and begin sharing with each other back and forth. How do we introduce and bring post-traumatic growth into our world? You see, just like many of you have had a situation, especially with the internet, I call my wife, she's a true WebMD guy. Like, as soon as she feels bad, she goes on to WebMD, self-diagnoses herself. And all of you have read all the studies that when you first study psychological problems and you read the DSM-3, 4, or 5, wherever you're at, you have all of those problems. When you read all of it, you've got all of those. When you go through really hard stuff, divorce, combat, death, loss of a job, it's normal to get depressed. It's natural to get depressed. Everybody gets depressed. But if you label that as post-traumatic stress, then you start manifesting more of those symptoms and it starts spiraling down and down and down and down and down. What we found is that after months and sometimes a year or so, that when you get past the initial shock and there's the initial depression and there's the self-doubts, that's when you grow. It's just like when you're lifting weights. You rip the muscles and then that space is where the new tissue grows that creates the increased strength. That's exactly what happens with post-traumatic growth. And what I'm going to ask you to do is share those so that you begin to build this mindset of seeing, becoming aware, and looking for post-traumatic growth. Now, if you have time, this is Martin Seligman's book, Flourishing. I strongly recommend that you grab this. Read it. It is full of stories, thoughts, ideas, and tools that will help you out. So with that, please connect with the people that you love, enjoy your dinner tonight, and take some time to do this exercise.